This story is not for the faint of heart. Fear is a part of you. There's no turning back. The nightmare has begun. The building didn't have an address, just coordinates sent in a confirmation email and a line that read, "Arrive at 6:45 p.m. sharp. No earlier, no later." Jenna Harper stood in front of a blank concrete structure in Queens, unsure if she was being scammed, abducted, or maybe both. A buzzer sounded as she approached, and a heavy door slid open before she could even knock. Inside, the world changed. Clean floors, white light, no echoes. Not a single clock in sight. A man in grey scrubs took her backpack without a word. A badge printer beeped, and he clipped the label to her shirt, Subject 17. Jenna followed him through silent corridors, each turn identical to the last, until they reached a narrow room. The bed looked military, flat, rigid, tucked too tight. A mounted camera above it followed her with a slow, mechanical hum. "This is where you'll sleep," the man said. His voice was flat. No name, no warmth, just routine. Wires were placed on her scalp, chest, wrists. Cold pads under her collarbone. The man pressed something on a remote and the lights dimmed to a soft grey. "Try to stay still. We need uninterrupted readings." Then he left. Jenna lay back and stared at the ceiling. The silence was strange. There wasn't even a hum from the ventilation. No white noise. Just her breath, loud and uncomfortably wet in the stillness. She closed her eyes. She didn't remember falling asleep, but she remembered waking up, sort of. The room looked wrong, darker. The corners pulsed. The camera above her was still, but it felt like it was watching more intently. Her limbs wouldn't move. Something pressed down on her chest. Not physically, but like a weight in her lungs. A figure stood at the edge of the room, not facing her, not quite shaped like a person, but clearly present. It didn't move. It didn't speak, but it knew she was there. It was patient, familiar, like it had been waiting. Her jaw wouldn't open. Panic surged through her like ice, screaming inside her skull while her body stayed locked. Then light snapped back. The shadows dissolved. The weight vanished. She sat up with a gasp, heart thudding so loud it echoed in her ears. A voice came through a hidden speaker, calm, unconcerned. "Subject 17, are you experiencing a disturbance?" She looked around wildly. There was something in the room. Another pause, longer than it should have been. "You were asleep. No abnormalities recorded." Her hands were trembling. She lay back down, but didn't close her eyes. 'Cause she was sure of one thing now. Sleep wasn't the danger. Waking up was. Jenna didn't tell anyone about the figure. She didn't know how. The moment she tried to form the memory into words, it began to slip, like a dream eaten by the morning. But her body remembered. Her limbs twitched. Her stomach churned. Her eyes refused to close for hours after the lights dimmed again. On the second night, something new changed. As the sensors were attached and the room locked down, Jenna noticed the camera above the bed clicking softly, like a clock with no hands. Every 7 seconds, tick, tick, tick. She tried to ignore it. When sleep finally came, it was instant and wrong. In the dream, she stood in a white hallway that had no end. The lights flickered, humming with a low static that pressed against her skull. She began walking without knowing why. With each step, the hallway grew thinner, tighter, the lights dimmer. Her feet made no sound. Then she heard it, barely, a dragging, something behind her. She turned. Nothing. But the static got louder. She kept walking, faster now. The hallway responded, stretching ahead, narrowing behind. The lights blinked one by one until only a faint red glow remained. Then came the whisper. Not a word, not a voice. Just the sound of something trying to breathe through broken teeth. Jenna ran. The hallway did not end. She tripped. Only there was nothing to trip over. She fell hard, flat on her back. The lights above snapped black. The static became a scream, not loud but sharp, like a needle scraping bone. And then she saw the figure again. Closer this time. Still faceless, still watching. But now it was crouched, like it was studying her. Jenna couldn't move, couldn't blink. The figure tilted its head. A clicking came from its chest, identical to the one from the camera. 7 clicks. Then stillness. Then, without warning, its body convulsed forward, like it had been yanked by an invisible rope. Inches from her face. She saw nothing but black. And then she woke up, screaming. The lights in the room flickered violently as the door burst open. 2 technicians rushed in. "Subject 17, what did you see?" one of them demanded, already checking her vitals. It touched me," Jenna stammered. "It was watching, and then it moved." The other technician turned to the monitor. No REM activity logged. Subject was in non-dreaming sleep. "That's not possible," Jenna said, voice rising. "I was there. I felt it." The 2 exchanged glances. "We're adjusting your dosage of melatonin tonight. Light sedation, just to stabilize the cycle." "I don't want sedation. You volunteered. It's protocol now." They left without further explanation. Jenna sat there in silence, sweat clinging to her skin like oil. Her breath was uneven. She looked up at the camera. It was blinking again. 7 clicks. Then stillness. She whispered under her breath, not sure who she was talking to. Who's watching who? Jenna began hearing things during the day. Not voices, not exactly. More like memories that didn't belong to her. Echoes that came without warning, buzzing in her ears like trapped insects. She would blink, and for a moment, the sterile white walls of the facility would ripple like heat on asphalt. And then the hallway would feel longer than before, and the shadows would linger a little too long after something passed. On the 3rd night, she tried not to sleep. She lay awake, eyes fixed on the blinking red light of the ceiling camera. 7 clicks. Pause. 7 clicks. She counted them until numbers stopped meaning anything. Around 3 a.m., the lights flickered again. But this time, they didn't come back. Pitch black swallowed the room whole. A mechanical whir whispered from somewhere above, like a machine that wasn't supposed to be running. Jenna sat up, at least she thought she did. The air felt thick, pressing against her face like underwater pressure. She opened her mouth to call out, but her voice was gone. The room wasn't a room anymore. She was standing in the middle of what looked like a massive, endless chamber, with rows of beds stretching in every direction, each with a copy of her lying motionless on top. Hundreds, maybe thousands. She walked slowly between them. Each Jenna wore a different expression, one terrified, one smiling too wide, one weeping silently. Their eyes were open but unfocused, and all of them, every one, were being watched by something standing in the dark just beyond the beds. Not a figure this time, a shape, massive, silent, unblinking. It didn't move. It didn't need to. Jenna stepped closer to one of the sleeping versions of herself. and it opened its eyes. Not hers, something else. Black and endless. And then it spoke. But the sound didn't come from its mouth. It came from everywhere, like a whisper bouncing inside her skull. "You are remembering wrong." Jenna stumbled back. All the other bodies began twitching. One by one, they turned toward her, mouths opening wide, too wide, as if something inside them was trying to escape through their throats. She screamed, and she woke up, but not in her bed. She was in a hallway, not the dream one. This was real. Bare walls, flickering lights, the scent of bleach and something sour beneath it. She was barefoot. Her hospital bracelet read Subject 17, but the timestamp was gone, smudged out. At the end of the hallway was a door marked Testing, Restricted Access. It was slightly open, and someone, or something, was breathing on the other side. Slow, wet, hungry. Jenna's body wouldn't move, not out of fear, but because something behind her had already wrapped invisible fingers around her spine. And the whisper came again. "You're not the dreamer." Jenna woke up screaming, but this time no one came. No doors opened. No technicians rushed in. The lights were back on, humming faintly, casting shadows that twitched at the edges. She checked her wrist. No bracelet. The bed she lay in wasn't hers. It looked like it belonged to a child. Tiny, faded blue sheets. The air smelled like dust and rotting plastic, like old dolls locked away too long. She sat up slowly. The room was unfamiliar. Bare walls, a cracked mirror, and a single chair facing her. On the chair sat a videotape. Her name was written on it in red marker. Not typed, not labeled, handwritten, shaky. She reached for it, fingers trembling. The moment she touched it, the television in the corner turned on by itself. Static, sharp and violent. It hissed like something alive. Jenna moved to eject the tape, but it was already inside, and playing. The screen flickered to life, and there she was, sleeping, in the same bed. On the screen, she began to thrash, cry out. Her limbs jerked like a puppet on broken strings, and then she sat up. Not the real Jenna, the one on the screen. And she turned to look directly into the camera. Her eyes were gone, just two deep, raw holes. She opened her mouth and spoke, but her voice wasn't hers. It was deeper, male, ancient, something that belonged underground. "You were not meant to wake up." Jenna backed away. The TV exploded into static again, and the door behind her creaked open on its own. Same hallway, same flickering lights. But this time, she knew it. She had walked it before. Every step echoed exactly like last time. Every sound repeated in her memory. The loop. She was inside it, and she couldn't tell where it ended, or if it ever did. Down the hallway, she heard a child crying, software rhythmic, but the sound wasn't coming from a child. It was too deep, guttural, like something pretending to cry, mocking. She turned a corner and saw the same bed again, the same blue sheets, the same videotape. This time, her name was crossed out, replaced with next. "No," she whispered. "I was already here." The lights flickered, and this time she saw them. Dozens of figures, half-formed, standing silently in the dark, watching her, blinking in and out with every flicker like ghosts in a corrupted file. They weren't moving. They were waiting. She screamed, but nothing came out. Her mouth moved, but the air was gone, sucked out like she was underwater. Her chest tightened. Her vision dimmed. Then the walls began to twist, stretch, melt. Reality folded in on itself like old film catching fire. And then she woke up again, in the same bed, The same chair, the same videotape, same red letters. But this time the tape read, "Stay asleep." This time, when Jenna opened her eyes, she didn't move, because something was already breathing beside her. She lay perfectly still, listening. Wet breaths, too close, slow and deliberate, like someone savoring the moment before a bite. She turned her head, just slightly, and there it was. Not a person, not even a shape, just a pulsing presence pressed against the edge of her perception. The air around it shimmered like heat, and the wall behind it looked distorted, like the dream was melting into the room again. It wasn't real, except she could smell it, like raw meat, damp wool, and something deeper, something she couldn't name but recognized in her bones. The thing didn't move, but her thoughts did. And that's when Jenna realized something had followed her back from the dream. Not memories, not hallucinations, something else. She forced herself to sit up. Her body obeyed sluggishly, like it was no longer sure whose commands to follow. The room looked identical to the others, but the mirror in the corner was different. It showed two reflections, Jenna, and behind her, something tall and thin, with no face, only a mouth, wide, grinning. It moved only when she looked away. Every time she blinked, it got closer and closer, until it was standing directly behind her. But when she turned to face it, nothing was there. The air, however, remembered it, buzzing with static and dread. She stumbled out of the room and into the hallway. Only this time it wasn't flickering. It was too normal, sterile, real. That was the worst part, because real meant she wasn't dreaming anymore. She walked. Doors passed by, all unmarked, except one. A steel hatch labeled Containment, Taste Room Taste. She felt her hand reach for the handle without her consent. Inside, the room was almost empty. One table, one chair, one plate, and on that plate, a small strip of raw human flesh, still warm, still twitching. She backed away, shaking, but the door slammed shut behind her. A screen in the corner blinked on. A white mask appeared on it. No eyes, no mouth, just a smooth surface with a voice that vibrated through the walls. "You made it further than the others," Jenna screamed, pounding on the door. "Let me out." But the voice didn't react. "You brought something back with you, Jenna. Something curious. It wants to understand taste, pain, hunger. We gave it yours." She froze. The piece of flesh twitched again. She looked down at her own arm, bandaged, stitched, blood soaking through. "No." Jenna opened her eyes again, but they weren't hers. The ceiling was unfamiliar, lower, cracked. Yellow-stained tiles formed patterns that looked too deliberate to be random. Her body felt different, heavy in strange places, lighter in others. She sat up. The arms weren't hers, too long, pale, scarred. She stood and caught sight of herself in a broken wall mirror. It wasn't her. It was someone else's face. A woman, maybe mid-30s, hollow cheeks, eyes that darted as if afraid to blink. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Inside, Jenna screamed. She rushed to the door, yanked it open, and stumbled into a corridor. It was different now, grimy, industrial. Pipes lined the walls like veins. The air buzzed with mechanical humming and a faint, wet whispering that never stopped. Someone was crying again, but this time, it was her own voice, coming from another room. She followed it, door by door, until she found it. Her body, slumped in a chair, strapped down, crying, whimpering, and still, somehow, asleep. "Wake up," Jenna whispered. "Please wake up." But the body didn't hear. It just wept. And then it started to laugh. A twitching, glitched out sound like a broken toy. Her own face tilted toward her and the eyes opened. They were solid black. The voice that came out wasn't hers anymore. "Too late. You've been overwritten." The walls pulsed. The pipes above began to bleed. Thick red sludge poured down in hot drops, sizzling against the floor. The lights flickered in rapid patterns, almost like Morse code. Something behind her ran, not walked, ran, across the hall with inhuman speed. She turned just in time to see a pale limb vanish into the shadows. She backed away, but the corridor behind her was gone, replaced with a hall of mirrors. Every reflection showed her in a different body. Male, female, child, old. Each one screaming, silently, trapped. And in every mirror, the same thing loomed behind them. A tall figure with hundreds of fingers pressed to the glass, scratching inward. Jenna fell to her knees, sobbing. "I want to go back," she whispered. "I want to be me again." From the mirrors, a chorus of her own voices responded in unison. "There is no me, only masks." She closed her eyes tight. The mirrors shattered. When she opened them again, she was back in her original body, alone, naked, in a chair, a light above her. The drill didn't descend. It hovered, buzzing, waiting, as if savoring her dread. Jenna couldn't move. Her limbs weren't restrained, but her body refused to respond. Not frozen, just overwritten, like someone else had the controls. From the ceiling, long metal arms unfolded, surgical, delicate. Each one tipped with a different tool. Clamps, needles, scalpel-thin blades that shimmered like they were vibrating at a different frequency. They didn't cut her skin. They pierced her mind. It didn't feel like pain. It felt like erasure, like parts of her were being deleted. Memories fell away like ash. Her mother's voice, the color of her first bedroom, the name of her favorite song, gone. But she was still aware of their absence. She could feel the holes left behind. Empty shelves in a library no one would ever visit again. A screen lit up across the room. On it, words began to type themselves out. Primary identity, disassembled. Subject ego structure, collapsing. Core self, exposed. The drill powered down, but she wasn't relieved, because something was emerging from beneath the floor. A cage. No, not a cage. A sarcophagus. Steel. Sealed shut with bolts that unlatched one by one, each opening accompanied by a hiss of hot air and the low sound of something moving inside. Jenna wanted to scream, but she didn't have a voice anymore, because it had been taken. The sarcophagus creaked open. Inside was a figure curled in the fetal position, skinless, twitching, eyes stitched shut. When it moved, it did so with unnatural precision, like it was remembering how to use a body. It stood and looked at her. Though it had no eyes, Jenna felt it staring into her, as if it had always known her. The voice came again, now mechanical and layered. "You are just the skin. It is the self." The creature took a step forward, then another. And Jenna felt something being pulled out of her. Her thoughts, her emotions, her sense of being, drawn toward it like static into a magnet. She saw flashes of other people, people she'd never met, but somehow was. A soldier, a nurse, a little girl hiding under a staircase, all screaming inside her head, all being peeled away. And beneath all of it, beneath the names, the fears, the memories, there was nothing. No Jenna. No identity, only a void. And the void was hungry. The machine spoke one last time. Congratulations. You are ready to be filled. Then the creature lunged. Jenna was no longer sure where her body ended and where the darkness began. It wasn't just inside her anymore. It had become her. It whispered in her ears, moved her limbs, made her breath shallow and ragged. The world around her felt like a distant echo. Disconnected. She was alive, but she wasn't living. Not anymore. She stood, or rather swayed, her body a marionette to an unknown force. The walls were closing in, the lights flickering, but there was no escape. The air had turned thick like molasses, clinging to her skin, to her lungs. It was heavier now. It knew her. It knew exactly who she was, where she was, why she was here. The creature's voice echoed through her skull. Layers of disjointed static, like a broken transmission. Welcome home. The sound of its words sliced into her thoughts, cutting through the growing numbness that clouded her mind. She wanted to scream, to run, but every time she tried, it was like the air compressed her. Her limbs became lead, her throat tightened. The room was shifting now, its edges warping like the last stages of a dream. Everything was melting, blending together. The concrete walls seemed to breathe, breathing. Jenna knew she was not in a real place anymore. Number she was inside something much worse, something beyond the real. And she was the catalyst. She had brought it all into existence. The mirrors, the dark entity, the voices, they had all come from her. From the part of her that had long been buried. The part that had been erased, until it was finally released. The room distorted even further. The door to the outside was there, just across from her. She could see it, taste it, but there was no escape. Not anymore. Not for her. The walls pulsed once again. Something was coming, something much bigger. The room was only the beginning. The humming grew louder. The lights flickered more violently. The screens on the walls burst to life. The blinking symbols, the cryptic messages, the screens filled with faces she recognized, and some she didn't. They were all her. Different versions of her, different lives, different bodies, all screaming. You are the trigger, the creature's voice whispered, but you will not be the end. Jenna tried to move, but now her movements weren't her own. Her hands, pale and scarred, reached for the screen in front of her, typing something she could not control. This is who you are, who you will always be. The screen flickered again. A final message appeared. It wasn't a message. It was a command. Broadcast. And suddenly, the room was alive with light. The walls pulsed, and Jenna's vision blurred with static. She was being pulled toward the screens, into the screens. Her face, her identity screamed at her from every angle, every reflection, every part of the room. The walls were closing in on her, not like solid matter, but like a liquid, soaked in a mixture of her own fear and broken pieces of her mind. She was drowning in herself. And then the transmission began. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a sound. It was a signal, a pulse of thought, of awareness, radiating outward from her. A wave, a scream into the void. It spread through the walls, through the screens, into the world. Outside, the sky went dark. And somewhere, someone far away, someone who didn't even know her name, felt it. The hunger, the empty, gnawing void that was her. And they listened. Jenna began hearing things during the day. Not voices, not exactly. More like memories that didn't belong to her. Echoes that came without warning. buzzing in her ears like trapped insects. She would blink, and for a moment, the sterile white walls of the facility would ripple like heat on asphalt. And then the hallway would feel longer than before, and the shadows would linger a little too long after something passed. On the third night, she tried not to sleep. She lay awake, eyes fixed on the blinking red light of the ceiling camera. 7 clicks, pause, 7 clicks. She counted them until numbers stopped meaning anything. Around 3 a.m., the lights flickered again, but this time they didn't come back. Pitch black swallowed the room whole. A mechanical whir whispered from somewhere above, like a machine that wasn't supposed to be running. Jenna sat up, at least she thought she did. The air felt thick, pressing against her face like underwater pressure. She opened her mouth to call out, but her voice was gone. The room wasn't a room anymore. She was standing in the middle of what looked like a massive, endless chamber, with rows of beds stretching in every direction, each with a copy of her lying motionless on top. Hundreds, maybe thousands. She walked slowly between them. Each Jenna wore a different expression, one terrified, one smiling too wide, one weeping silently. Their eyes were open but unfocused, and all of them, every one, were being watched by something standing in the dark just beyond the beds. Not a figure this time, a shape, massive, silent, unblinking. It didn't move. It didn't need to. Jenna stepped closer to one of the sleeping versions of herself, and it opened its eyes. Not hers, something else. Black and endless. And then it spoke. But the sound didn't come from its mouth. It came from everywhere, like a whisper bouncing inside her skull. "You are remembering wrong." Jenna stumbled back. All the other bodies began twitching. One by one, they turned toward her, mouths opening wide, too wide, as if something inside them was trying to escape through their throats. She screamed, and she woke up, but not in her bed. She was in a hallway, not the dream one. This was real. Bare walls, flickering lights, the scent of bleach and something sour beneath it. She was barefoot. Her hospital bracelet read Subject 17, but the timestamp was gone, smudged out. At the end of the hallway was a door marked Testing, Restricted Access. It was slightly open, and someone, or something, was breathing on the other side. Slow, wet, hungry. Jenna's body wouldn't move, not out of fear, but because something behind her had already wrapped invisible fingers around her spine. And the whisper came again. "You're not the dreamer.